What really happened at 112 Ocean Avenue in December of 1975 to January of 1976? Was it simply a case of a family's imagination? Was the house really haunted? Or maybe the Lutzes themselves were haunted? Might it be something so unique that it became a combination of all three? Perhaps the truth died with George and Kathy Lutz because it would seem that the events at the place formerly known as 112 Ocean Avenue have disappeared into myth and legend. How has the Amityville Horror managed to stay relevant over the course of almost 50 years? What is it about this story that seems to resonate with each passing generation? How has it survived the countless retellings where each time the story is told we get a little further away from the truth? Is it because it's based more in fact than fiction? I would like to share with you why I believe this was a rare combination of real events. Okay, so I want to briefly touch on the DeFeo family simply to address why I do not believe that the DeFeo family murders had anything to do with the haunting at 112 Ocean Avenue. So let's start with the facts that we know. November 13th, 1974, there were 6 members of the DeFeo family that were found murdered in their own beds. The pictures of the crime scene would suggest that all the victims were found face down in their bed. The weapon that was believed to be used was a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. Now, like I said, I don't want to dig too deep into the DeFeos, only really enough to establish why I don't believe that Ronald DeFeo Jr. was possessed by a demon or influenced by anything other than drugs and mental illness. The house was actually under surveillance during the time of the murders, and a lot of people don't actually realize that. The surveilling detective actually witnessed Dawn exit the home and walk over to the river and throw an item into the river, which is believed to have been some type of weapon. She was also found with gunshot residue on her hands and on the dress that she was wearing. And to me, that's pretty incriminating. That to me speaks to the fact that she probably helped with the entire endeavor. You don't just get gunshot residue on your hands unless you maybe had a hold of a gun that was being shot at you or that you shot a gun. I mean, I'm willing to bet that she shot a weapon that night. Whether they had 2 of the same weapon, I don't know. But that's definitely something to consider. Now, what I believe happened, all right? I believe that Ronnie and Don acted together to go and commit these murders. And I believe that they started with the parents. They killed mom and dad. And after that had happened, I think that basically at that point, Ronnie sent Dawn ahead of him to go down and comfort the other kids. Because when you're dealing with a 13, 12, and 9-year-old kid, there's no way they're going to leave the protection of their room. Even if they're hearing gunshots, they're not going to leave their room to find out what's going on. More than likely, I believe that they're more inclined to hide under their covers, and just hope that the bad man goes away, right? So I think what probably happened is Ronnie sent Dawn ahead of him and maybe even told her, tell him the truth. It'll get him to stay there. So that kind of speaks to the evil, I think, that had to have been in their heads. And I'm not saying demonic influence. I just think that these were truly just evil people. That she was able to go ahead of them. And I would imagine it probably might have gone something like this. She might have gone in and said, guys, Ronnie is upstairs. He just shot mom and dad. Just stay in your bed and hopefully he won't notice you. I'll try to distract him. Just stay here. And so then that would give Ronnie time to walk the house at a slow pace, try to make sure that he's efficient with his gunshots. You shoot a gun too many times. Now, there's a lot of people that believe that there's some sort of ghost or a demon that maybe muffled the sound of the weapons firing, or that the children were held down by these forces. I don't believe either are true. Like I said, I think that, they were convinced to lay there in that way. And at that point, once, you've got the killer that walks into the room, they're not going to move. He's just going to tell him, turn over, stay still. And he shoots him. I then think he went and turned the gun on Dawn, and therefore he left no witnesses to the crime scene. Then he was able to go and make up whatever story he wanted for that entire bit, right? So I don't believe that Ronald DeFeo Jr. is even capable of telling the truth anymore. Even if he wanted to, he's probably at this point told so many different versions of the truth that I don't think he actually knows what happened anymore. Again, like I said, that's all I really wanted to touch on there. I really do believe that Ronald DeFeo Jr. is probably is mentally ill. And that probably had more to do with what he did than anything else. I don't believe that there was a demon that possessed him or Dawn. I think they had a very rocky relationship with their parents. Unfortunately, it ended the way that it did. I can't possibly comprehend the kind of evil that it must have taken to go through the home and systematically shoot your entire family. I've done a lot of things in my life that I'm not proud of, even things that I look back on and I definitely would never do again. But I just can't even imagine, shooting your entire family. And now that we kind of got that out of the way, we'll move into the Lutz family and talk about the actual Amityville haunting, that had to do with the Lutzes and the time they spent in the home. All right, let's do that. All right, so now as we begin to dive into the actual 28 days that the Amityville Horror book and movies were based on, I think it's important for me to help you understand why this is so intriguing to me and why I tend to believe elements of the story. There's a lot of parallels within this story of 112 Ocean Avenue and my home growing up in Fort Myers, Florida. There's so many parallels that it's uncanny. And I think that's why I've always kind of looked at the Amityville Horror as a terrifying story and movie to me, because it resonates with me. I can relate. All right, so let's kind of break this down. So the first thing I think that's important to note is that George Lutz had a history of dabbling in the occult. Now, this was later confirmed in a documentary that Danny Lutz was involved in, called My Amityville Horror. This was where Danny Lutz kind of did his version of what happened, and it doesn't, stray too far away from the actual events that took place in the home. If anything, I think that most of it, he affirms it. The one thing that you do get out of this is that Danny hated George. I mean, he hated him. One of the biggest things that Danny began to harp on, they're living together before they moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, and Danny actually witnessed George do things. He had tons of books on the occult. It seemed like George was kind of dabbling in some things that may have been a little questionable and that may have led him down a path that I don't think he ever meant to go down. I think he got himself into something that he couldn't figure out how to fix. And I've seen that happen. I watched it happen to my mom. So that fact in and of itself, for me, man, I totally get it. Danny even claimed in his documentary that he had even seen George move things without touching them. And I know that it's really easy to sit there and kind of be like, well, that's just a kid's imagination running crazy, especially that he doesn't like him. Of course he's going to make this stuff up about him. Here's my point, though. Now check this out. How many magicians have you seen on national television move things without touching them, make things happen, or have hidden knowledge of things that they couldn't possibly know? Happens all the time. The most recent one that comes to my mind is a gentleman that went on, I believe it was America's Got Talent. Yeah, there was a guy that went on America's Got Talent named Mike Super. And this guy had a friend named Desmond. Now, Desmond, he talks about how Desmond had been a friend of his from a very young age. I want to show that clip now where he kind of talks about Desmond and how he was introduced to him and how Desmond began to become a part of his life.
A little nervous.
Nervous?
Of course.
He's not nervous.
Well, I'm going to try something with Desmond today that I've never tried.
People now like, how could a 6-year-old have the ability to be involved in the occult? And the answer to that is simple. He didn't.
And stare at those
If
chalkboards.
Howie's not
Now,
thinking,
I wanna include
Desmond
some
can't read
randomness.
his
Can we
mind.
get-